Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord is a game that keeps pulling me back. I've installed and uninstalled and reinstalled this game several times since it came out, and every time I come back to it, I always have fun with it for several hours. My problem is I never really push too deep into these campaigns. I have a very large habit of creating new characters and trying new build ideas and getting them to around vassal stage before thinking about moving on and trying something else. I've made trader focused characters, mercenary focused characters, horse archers. I've made characters that are focused entirely on combat. I've made characters that could barely swing a sword but are genius level leaders and stewards. But the thing is, no matter what character I'm actually playing as, I never end up pushing all the way to the end of the campaign. Some of that is on me. It's part of the way that I like to play games. I always like to try new play styles more than pushing super deep with one particular playstyle. But other parts of it I would put on Bannerlord to be a little bit better. There are parts once you get to the vassal stage where I find, at least for me, I start to lose interest because you lose a lot of agency over what you're doing, and I'll get more into that later into the video. But despite the issues I have with the, let's say, mid late game to late game of Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord, I still think it's a fantastic game that definitely does keep pulling me back. At least once or twice a year, I get the urge to come back to Calradia, start a new character, and build up an army and just see what happens. So in this video, I'm going to go over all the different things I really like about Bannerlord and the things I think you would be interested in, but I'll also highlight some of the issues I have with it as well, because definitely there are some problems that I'd like to discuss. So just in case you haven't heard of Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord or the Mountain Blade series at all, I personally don't have much experience with the previous games, but when I saw this game had been released, it really looked interesting to me and pulled me in. Basically, what it is it's like a medieval sandbox RPG where you create a character with a bunch of different focus points at the beginning of your life, let's say, and then you kind of focus on those particular attributes as you move around through the world and make yourself stronger, whether that's gathering a large army and winning a whole bunch of battles, or focusing on trading, or focusing on smithing. There's different ways you can approach the world, although I think at the end of the day, there's one or two ways that are kind of agreed as the best way to play. I'll get into that a little bit later. Essentially, you're moving around the world, recruiting troops from new cities, building up your army to the first limit you have when you're just a nobody out in the world. You can get up to about 20 troops or so, and you try to win these small scale battles against looters and minor bandits to pick up their loot and sell their loot and make more money that way. As you earn money, you also earn renown, which increases your character's kind of notoriety in the world and eventually allows you to recruit more party members or more soldiers and more companions as well, to give them their own armies to lead and their own trade caravans to run. And you basically build a little empire from your own clan. And it's a lot of fun, actually, especially when you're just starting out. That's where I have the most fun with it because the world is your oyster. You've got this grand plan for what you want to do, and it can be a lot of fun to kind of embark on that journey. And that's really where a lot of the fun and addiction comes from with this game, at least to me. Later on, as you get a little farther, you can end up earning enough clan renown in order to actually become a vassal of one of the many kingdoms around the world. You basically tie yourself to that or swear fealty to that particular kingdom, and now you are helping out with the wars that they are involved in and defending your towns and castles. The game calls them fiefs, so you're running around defending these or taking new ones to try to expand your kingdom. It's usually around that point where I start to lose a bit of interest. And again, I'll come back to that later when we get to that point of the video. However, it is worth quickly noting that after the vassal stage, you can eventually end up creating your own kingdom and essentially being your own force out there on the map, where finally you get to make all the choices and you are defending your own lands rather than the lands of the lord liege you swore fealty to. So let's talk a little bit about my favorite part of Bannerlord, which is basically the early game into the early mid game. During this stage, you are a little bit fragile because you don't have a large army. So when you're moving out on the map, you have to be careful that bandits don't jump you because early on you can get overwhelmed even by looters. You can't necessarily go 1 versus 7 and beat looters unless you have a bow and you're on horseback, in which case you might be able to do that. But generally, you're being careful. You're clearing out looters. You're taking in prisoners and all their gear. You're selling them off and recruiting more troops to make your army bigger so that these fights become less of a hassle for you. As your troops gain experience, you can upgrade them into their next tier. And I think each troop has about 5 tiers of power. By the time they get to tier 2 or tier 3, they're actually quite strong and can hold their own, especially against looters and even other bandit types. And this is where a lot of the fun is watching your team grow stronger and also choosing what types of troops you want in your party. Because the different recruits you get from the different kingdoms have different branching paths in their upgrade trees. Some of them can become heavily armored shield warriors. Some of them will become huge two-handed sword wielders. Some will be archers or cavalry. And they all have their own little quirks that make them interesting. And it's fun to think about, okay, do I want to have horse archers? Okay, well, then I have to travel over to this kingdom and recruit them. Or do I want my party to just be all from one kingdom and play that kind of role playing scenario where we are just Vlandian and we only recruit Vlandian troops? You can also do other things like roam around the world to visit different towns and take part in tournaments, which I think are a very fun way to, first off, practice your combat, because the combat is a little bit, the combat has its own mechanics that can take a little while to get used to. So tournaments is a risk-free way to practice that and upgrade your combat skills. And if you win the tournament, you end up getting awesome pieces of equipment, sometimes a weapon that you'll be using for the vast majority of the game, sometimes just armor upgrades or even mount upgrades as well. In one tournament, I won a camel, which I thought was kind of fun. So you're basically roaming the map, defeating bandits, sometimes taking out bandit hideouts, and taking part in tournaments in order to increase your combat skills and upgrade your gear. There are also quests that you can pick up from all the different towns and villages and castles. And this is where I have a little bit of a complaint because some of these quests, they just don't really feel worth doing, whereas other quests are much more viable. And you find yourself ignoring maybe half the quests you see, maybe even more than that, and then just picking up the certain quests that you like to do that you know you can do easily. You know, some examples are like deliver the herd quests are very easy. You pick up a bunch of cattle and you transport it to a different place and they pay you. Very simple. Or you escort a merchant caravan and you're guaranteed to have some combat encounters, which are very fun. And those are the quests I always accept. But there are other quests that have you going to a different town and playing like some sort of poker game with somebody or doing certain negotiation things that I just never really had fun with. Maybe you will find some fun in those types of quests, but for me, I found the quests are kind of hit or miss. But you will find some quests that you definitely want to do. They will help you earn money, but then there's other quests that are just not so good. So your mileage may vary for that type of thing. I also want to touch on your own character build, which is another huge part of what makes the game interesting and fun to play, at least for me, because you can take a totally different approach every time you start over the game. There are character builds you can do that focus heavily on combat, so you can make sure you're winning most of your tournaments and you're being more effective out on the battlefield. I find these builds to be really good for clearing out bandit hideouts or doing tournaments, as mentioned, or fighting on small scale battles. But there's other builds where you're totally focused on being a leader. You have good social skills, good army management skills. You can make your army eat less food, require less money to pay their wages. You can help heal your not only your own character but your troops after battle as well. Some of these skills really help to be a leader of armies, and you'll find yourself staying out of physical combat more often and just letting your troops do the work, or even just simming the fights, which people tend to do, especially as you get later into the game and these fights can take 30 minutes or longer. I tried to do a trader focused character, but I found I just wasn't really having all that much fun with it. But I can see the viability, especially when it just comes to making money. You can keep your army relatively small while you just roam the map, stay out of combat, buy goods from this town and sell it over in that town. And the bigger your trade skill gets, the more tips you get from the NPCs around the world that help you to do that more effectively. You can also focus very heavily on smithing so that you can craft your own gear for yourself and your companions, but also you can craft gear to sell. And I've heard stories about how this can become absolutely broken if you push it far enough. I've never gone that far, but it does sound like something that'd be fun to look into. Now, after testing all these different builds, I did come to the conclusion that it seems like, at least to me, there is one particular playstyle that just seems to be the best way to go about it, and that is the leader character, where you're less focused on combat yourself. You're more focused on increasing your stewardship, your medicine, your leadership, your charm. These types of things help make all the NPCs around the world like you better and allow you to pay less for your armies, feed them better, heal them better. And it just seems to be like the best way to play. So if you're really not sure which way to go, I'd recommend focusing on an intelligence and social focused character where you stay out of combat, maybe you sim more battles than normal, and really just focus on growing your forces, making the other NPCs around the world, the other kings and queens, like you more. So that'll make your life a little easier as you get into the mid game and later on when kingdoms start to become a thing. Another thing I really like about Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord is the world and how alive it can feel. The world features about 8 different kingdoms, where 3 of those kingdoms are empire focused and they take up the sort of central area of the map. And then surrounding all the empires are these different kingdoms like Britannia, Sturgia, Khazate, Asarai, and Vlandia. And these different kingdoms have their own kind of flavors to them. The Sturgians are like the Northmen, kind of Viking type. The Vlandians are kind of like your adventurous, heavy armor cavalry kind of combat focus. The Empire has a little bit of a Roman vibe to it where they're kind of well balanced and you have a bunch of different options. The Crusade are horse lords where they focus on horse archery and cavalry specifically. And the Aserai are a little bit more trade focused, but they have some interesting combat units as well. And as you move around the world more and start to remember where the different towns are, the different castles, and where the kingdoms live on the map, you start to become more familiar with it, and it really can feel pretty alive. You're moving around the map, the sun is setting, the sun is rising, there's looters over here, there's caravans moving all over the place from all sorts of different factions, and it just feels very fun to live in. Now, these NPCs might seem like they have their own schedule that they work on, but really, at least to me, what it seems like is more based on random chance. They will go and randomly do things, but because the world is so big and everyone is out there doing random things, it still feels alive. I also briefly touched on companions, which are another part of the game that make it feel alive. These are a vast array of different characters that spawn kind of randomly into the world, into different parts of the world as well. So when you're moving around the map and visiting towns, you want to make sure that you're visiting the tavern district so you can at least talk to these companions and get to know them. And then later on, when you're looking at bringing companions onto your team, you can go through the encyclopedia, which is another really cool feature that Bannerlord offers, where you can look at all the different people that are in the world. And if you've met them, you can see more about them. You can see if they're good at trading or if they're better warriors. Are they good army leaders? And pick and choose the companions you want to bring onto your team and even marry, by the way, and create a family with. I just found that I was really starting to enjoy Calradia. The more and more I played the game, the more familiar I got with the world, and the more I learned about the different kingdoms and their little quirks. I found myself thinking like, oh, maybe this time I'll do a Sturgian Northman where we're Viking focused on invading the other territories, or maybe this time I'll be a Britannian woodsman where I just focus on defending my own lands and try to be peaceful, or I'll be an empire person this time where I want to take over the whole world. When you know more about the world, it helps you decide how you want to play the game, I find, and I had a lot of fun with that. Finally, one other thing that Bannerlord does so well is create stories as you play. Every single time you start a new character, the game is going to go a wildly different way than you might have imagined because you have no say in what's happening in Calradia. You are roaming the world and just taking up opportunity as you find it. You might have a plan to side with Britannia and become a Britannian vassal, but they might never go to war, and you might find yourself in a position where actually I guess I'm going to help out the Khuzait this time because I happen to be in their territory when this happened, and that's just what I'm going to do. You might actually get overrun by bandits or take on a fight where you didn't realize they had reinforcements and end up losing your entire army and having to start from scratch. That's definitely something that happened to me several times. No playthrough of Bannerlord will be the same, and that is a vast majority of the fun for me. I have to mention there is a campaign that you can play where it is a little bit more streamlined and you are shoehorned into certain things happening in the world. But if you play it on sandbox mode, which is what I was doing for this video, it really is just all up in the air. You have no idea what's going to happen. You just got to go out there and build your life. And that's a big part of the fun. I don't think it's all fun though. There are definitely slow parts to the game where I start to lose interest and either want to create a new character or even start playing a different game. When you find yourself in peacetime, you're basically stuck running around just doing quests or maybe trading. And I never had that much fun with that part of the game. Also, on the flip side, when you're at war, especially when you're a vassal, you are at the mercy of what your lord does, who they go to war with, where they put their army. And sometimes you'll find yourself at odds with what they're doing, and you just have to deal with that. You know, you might have a town over on this side of the map that is being threatened, but the Lord's army is over on the other side of the map wanting to do something else that seems totally irrelevant. And they will continually make decisions that you will disagree with. And it can sometimes cause you to lose your whole army, and it just can feel bad. So that's something that you have to fight through if you want to eventually get to that late part of the game where you actually own your own kingdom and have a little bit more agency in what you want to do. Again, that's normally the part where I start to think, okay, now I'm ready to try a new character build or even just play a different game. So it's not all fun and games with Bannerlord, but I do think that early to mid game gameplay loop is extremely well done. And even though I'm finished with this video, I'm certainly going to come back and just play it on my own time again because there's nothing else that does it quite like this game. You know, if you know another game that allows you to build a life in a medieval world like Calradia, please let me know in the comments because I'm looking for that kind of thing. So those are my thoughts on Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord. I do need to acknowledge that there was an expansion that was released called War Sails where they introduced boats and naval combat. I only found out about this DLC when I was about 75% through the making of this video, and that is not something I have a large interest in. If you've played it and you like it, let me know. It's definitely something I can check out in the future, but I just wanted to acknowledge there is that DLC that I have not dabbled with. Again, that's my thoughts on the game. I really like it. I'm certainly going to come back and play it again just to get that early game feel that's always been so much fun. If you guys have played this game, please let me know in the comments. What kind of characters do you like to play? What keeps pulling you back to Bannerlord? And have you been able to push through into that late game kingdom management part? Because I have a bit of interest in that. I just don't have the desire to push through the kind of slog of the vassal stage. If you made it to this part of the video, I just want to thank you very much. I really appreciate you making it this far. I'm pleasantly surprised by the reception my recent videos have gotten, and it's very encouraging, and I'm driven to make more and more videos. I'm already working on the next one. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.